Hey guys, I am here filming my October wrap up. I did really good this month actually. I read 8 books and 5 volumes of manga, so that's a lot to get through. So without further ado, here we go. The very first book that I finished this month was Chimera by Mira, the third book in the Parasitology series. It is a horror trilogy. And it basically follows this idea that scientists were playing around with tapeworms and ended up making them medically beneficial to us. So a tapeworm would be implanted into your intestines, and it would help you control diseases like asthma, allergies, diabetes, epilepsy, all these kinds of things, either by fighting off invaders or just by secreting out medicine. Now, this is a horror, so of course, when we come into the story, things have started going horribly, horribly wrong. And now, obviously, this is the third book of that trilogy, and so there's not a ton that I can say about this book plot wise without giving it away. I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. The very first 2 books in the series, I was really struggling with. Mira is a pen name for Shannon McGuire, and one of the things that I love about Shannon McGuire so much is her world building. And there wasn't a ton of world building in this book because it was like a modern day equivalent, just we have tapeworms. And so it was missing something that I love so much about Shannon McGuire's work. And so there wasn't the world building that I was hoping for, and I really struggled to connect to any of the characters. And like the plot was fine and I was enjoying that, but it wasn't quite enough to say that I was really happy with the series, but I finally connected with it with this book. The main character of Sal kind of finally found her place in the world and was a much better character, I thought. And because I finally had Sal to hang on to, I was able to look at the other characters and a little bit. And the other character that I really loved, Fishy, he also made a bigger appearance in this book, and so I was able to love him wholeheartedly. The plot, the resolution of the plot, I thought was very. I thought it was well thought out. I liked the solution. So yeah, I think that this book redeemed the series for me, and I think that it is a solid like 4-star kind of series. I'm going to keep it, and I will reread it in the future, especially like knowing how it's going to end. It'll be interesting to read the beginning again. So yeah, I liked it. After that, I went ahead and read 13th Child by Patricia Wrede. This is the first book of the Frontier Magic series. It is a middle grade series. And this first book, we're really just getting to know our main character of F, who is the 13th child. So she actually originally lived in more like eastern United States. She's actually in kind of an alternate wild, wild west where, there's magic. But her and her family, when we first meet her, are living in the east of the United States. But kind of everyone around her is treating her differently because they think that she's super unlucky and is going to bring a lot of unhappiness to everybody and everything around her. And then people are also starting to treat her her twin brother differently because he's the 7th son of a 7th son, and he is expected to do these amazing things. And her parents, between that and some other reasons, decide to move out west. And so this is really the story of F trying to find a place for herself and trying to really grapple with this idea of what it means to be the 13th child, and does it matter? Everybody around her has always said it matters and it's going to be a big deal, and she is trying to figure out like, okay, but what can I do in the world that is going to be good? And that, I think it was very, very interesting to watch that. And I really liked the main character of F. However, I don't love books where the main storyline is let's get to know this person as they grow up. because it's just not my favorite. I generally tend to prefer like a more focused plot that is like we meet the people and there's this problem and then the climax with the resolution and then the conclusion. Like that's my preference. So this was a little bit harder. However, I still found myself really, really enjoying it. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it had a better, like a plot line that I preferred, but I still think it was very well done. And I'm going to go ahead and continue on with this series. After that, I did pick up The Osiris Curse, the second book in the Tweed and Nightingale series by Paul Crilley. It starts with this book, The Lazarus Machine. It's a duology. And it follows our main characters of Sebastian Tweed and Octavia Nightingale. And in the first book, when they first met, they kind of teamed up because they were looking into the disappearances of each of their respective parent unit. And at the end of that first book, they found one of the parents, and now in this book, they are presented with another case to solve. In that Nikola Tesla has been killed, so it's who killed Nikola Tesla. But also they find that it relates to the other person's parents' disappearance. This is a book that I really probably should have DNF'd because I got to page 150 about there, and there was this big reveal for this for the world building part of it. And I remember reading the paragraph. I immediately closed the book and I walked away because it was terrible. It was wholly unbelievable. So it wasn't just that it was unnecessary, which is the kind of twists and reveals that I don't like anyway. It wasn't even unnecessary. It was unbelievable. And that's a big problem for me. And so I walked away in the hopes that, okay, well, maybe I would have some time to kind of piece together, okay, it's not necessarily unbelievable. There were clues laid, maybe that I missed. And so, but no, there wasn't. It was just out of nowhere, surprise world building thing. And it was, I actually came back thinking, okay, well, that was a dumb thing. That was unnecessary. Like, it was unnecessary. I don't like it, but I only have 130 pages left. I'm going to finish this book and therefore finish this series. But honestly, there was no way that this book was ever going to be anything more than a disappointment. And I liked the action. That was really what had me sold. It was that we didn't have a ton of character development or a ton of world building or a ton of really anything other than action. And I really liked the action. I thought it was very well done. And then, so to throw in this kind of surprise world building thing, it just ruined it for me. Anyway, I don't regret finishing it. I just do think it was a waste of time, which, whatever. It's done now. It's going to leave my house. What are you going to do? Oh, and the other part of it is that there was actually a little bit of a romance. And like, it's not that I'm against romance. It's just that it was so predictable. Okay. Rant over. On to the next one. I actually read Claymore's volume 6 and 7 by Norihiro Yagi. And this is a series that is about the Claymores, which are females who have taken on some of the essence of monsters to be strong enough and fast enough to fight the full-blown monsters to kill them and make sure that they're not like hunting humans anymore. We follow, they're called Claymores because of the sword that they carry. But we follow our main character of Claire, and before I read these 2 volumes, I was very hesitant about whether I was going to continue with this series. The way that the drawing style is, everybody kind of looks alike, and you can really only tell the difference between people from like their hair, which hairstyles kind of change, especially as you're moving. And so like there'd be these big fight scenes, and I don't know who's fighting who, and I just really struggled with figuring out who the different characters are. And I thought this storyline was interesting, but there seemed to be this mystery and we weren't getting any hints about it, and I just I wasn't invested. And then I read these two books and I got more of the story that I was actually looking for about Claire, because the interesting thing is that Claire is literally the worst Claymore. There's 47 Claymores and she is ranked 47th. Like, and so it's like, okay, how are you even surviving? How are you able to do any of this? And we started getting some of those answers, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Okay, I'm back in, and it did help that I was a little bit. It was a little bit easier for me to follow the drawings this time around. I'm not really sure if maybe it just clicked. I don't know, but I'll continue on with this series because again, I really am invested in figuring out how Claire is able to survive, and I think we're going to get more information in the next couple of volumes. After that, I picked up The Body at the Tower by Y.S. Lee. It is the second book in the Mary Quinn series, which starts with A Spy in the House, which is this book. And this is a series that follows Mary Quinn in Victorian type of London, and she is a spy. She actually was a thief, I believe, and then she got caught, and then this school kind of picked her up, and a girls' school picked her up, and then they were like, hey, surprise, this is also a thief, or like a spy house, and you seem to have the aptitudes that we're looking for. Do you want to become a spy? The first book followed her very first job as a spy. The second book followed her second job. I really, really love this series so much because I love the idea that women at this time were so underestimated, and they're using that to their advantage. They're saying like, yeah, women are overlooked, and that's why they make the best spies. I love that idea. I really like Mary Quinn as a character. I find her very believable, and I also just like the particulars of what she's struggling with. She's struggling to find her place in the world. And what does it mean when like your place technically kind of keeps changing because you're a spy? And how can you be honest with the people that you're trying to befriend or have a romance with, or like when you can't, like, what do you do when you can't be honest with them? And then she's also dealing with some interesting things with her own heritage. There's a slow burn romance, which is like, oh, I love slow burn romances so much. I just am really, really loving this series. It's 4 books long, and I'm a little bit sad that it's not longer, but I am very excited to pick up the next book. After that, I read Firestorm by Shannon Mayer. It is the 3rd book in the Elemental series, which starts with Recurve, this book. It is about Larkspur, who is an elemental, more or less a fairy, but she has a connection to the earth, and she had her powers blocked very early on. Some things happened. She ends up going into becoming a guard, and then at the end of the first book there was a bunch of stuff that happened, which I can't give much of. Like, this is another thing where I just can't give a whole lot of the plot because like of the 3rd book, because it spoils the first book and the second book. But in the first book, there was this stuff that happened at the end. In the second book, she was sent off on a diplomatic mission to a different kingdom, the Water Kingdom. And in this 3rd book, she is now finally facing the consequences for the actions that she took in that first book, and is sent off to the Fire Kingdom. Now, we find out pretty quickly that this is a little bit of a ruse of sorts, but it's very interesting. The thing that I find the most interesting is that I'm pretty sure that Shannon Mayer, as the author, had to have plotted out her entire series ahead of time, because it very much feels like a comic book series where you're getting a little bit more information with each new volume. And I actually think that that's really cool. She is building this world slowly, and we are getting invested in Lark and who she is, and allowing her, Lark, to become a character who is absolutely going to do the right thing. And that was much more evident in this book, where she was much more about loyalty and justice and doing the right thing, no matter the cost. And I really, really love that. It plotting out that book allows for things to kind of develop in a really nice way. It allows her to figure out when and where she's going to be putting world building information in. But again, also like it allows her to develop each of the characters individually. And I really, really enjoy that. The only quibble I have is it looks like there might be a small love triangle. And I'm like, guys, don't always need the love triangle. But it's not a big deal right now. And I'm kind of hopeful that maybe it isn't a deal ever. I don't know. We'll see. It still doesn't detract from my enjoyment of it. And the really interesting thing is I kind of could figure out, after the first book, I could kind of figure out what the second book was going to be and then what the third book was going to be. And now I don't know what the fourth book is going to be about at all. And I'm very excited to, find out about that. After that, I read volumes 3, 4, and 5 of Shortcake by Sue Morishita. It is another manga series, and it is such this sweet, cute little manga series, you guys. It is just so much fun. It is a shoujo manga, which means it's aimed at like teenage girls. And generally speaking, the main character is a girl, and there is romance stuff to it. Anyway, I really like them. But in this one, we meet our main character of 10, and she is going to high school in a town. Her high school is like 2 hours away from her hometown because her hometown just doesn't have its own high school. So she moves into a boarding house in the town where her high school is located, and of course shenanigans ensue. It is adorable. There is a bit of a love triangle, but in this case, I just find that hilarious. 10 was for quite a while completely oblivious. I mean, she's not the most observant chick I've ever met. And more than anything, I actually like the two guys that are really interested in her, because one of them is just hilarious. He's just so invested in this other guy being his best friend. He's just like, hey, you're my best friend, and maybe you should tell me, like, give me some tips on how I can win 10 over. And this guy, the rival, is just like, oh my gosh, we're rivals. I'm not telling you anything. And I think that dynamic is just really fun to watch. This is like the most fun I've had with manga since I picked up Library Wars at the beginning of this year. And so it's been really, really fun to read this book. I'm a little bit sad that my library only has the first 5 volumes. It has number 6 on order, but now I have to wait for like, I don't even know how long, because I think there's 13 volumes so far. It's okay. It'll be okay. But yeah, so that's a series that I will continue whenever I get it. After that, I did read Seraphina by Rachel Hartman. This I loved. I am actually not wholly coherent about why I love this book. But this is a book that follows the main character of Seraphina, who is half dragon, and she is also a court musician. At a time where they're supposed to be celebrating this peace treaty between the humans and the dragons, and it has been fraying at the edges. And it follows her as this treaty kind of falls apart. It is very, very interesting. I love Rachel Hartman's writing style. I think that Seraphina is an amazing character. She is described as prickly, and I love that she's prickly for a very good reason. She doesn't want anybody to find out that she's a dragon. And I just kind of love it. And then one of the other main characters that we meet, Prince Lucian Kiggs, I love him as a character. He's a great counterbalance to Seraphina. I even like Griselda, and she's a little bit of a facepalm. She is ridiculous, and I just kind of enjoy the dynamic that is being set. The world is very, very interesting, and I cannot wait to get into the next book. And then after that, I read Midnight Blue Light Special by Shannon and McGuire. This is the second book in the Cryptid series, which follows a family of cryptozoologists who basically are studying monsters, cryptids. They study monsters, they, help them out when need be. They enforce the rules of a polite society, and when these monsters don't follow the rules, they kill them. And so we were, in the first volume of this series, we were actually following Wrede as she was in the middle of a year in New York, seeing that if she could make it as a professional ballroom dancer. And in this book, she had to make that choice. And also, oh, by the way, the bad guys are coming, the Covenant, the ones who like see a monster and kill him on sight, regardless of whether they're actually a threat to humans or not. And of course, Wrede's boyfriend is part of the Covenant. It's all, of course, it's drama. But I liked this book. I thought it was a good conclusion. However, it was kind of an inevitable book. At the end of the first book, I kind of was like, oh, I know where the second one's going to go. And it did. And there was nothing more to it than kind of the inevitable. And I didn't appreciate, I really wanted more. And so I did end up feeling a little bit disappointed by this book just because I wanted more than what I got. But I did really like, on the positive side, I did really like getting to know some of the side characters better, especially Ryan and Istis. I think they are amazing, and I really hope that they come back. The next book is going to follow a different narrator, so I read it, and I will continue on with the series, and hopefully I don't run into that same predictability problem in the next one. And then after that, I went and picked up Mind Games by Kiersten White. This is the first book in a duology. And honestly, these are short books. They're only about 250 pages. And it's really, I mean, I see why they broke it up into two different books, but it is primarily one storyline. And at the end of this book, it was definitely at a good resting place to stop the book. And it was not a wholly satisfying conclusion, but it was decent. Like, I see why they did what they did. I don't necessarily agree with it. However, I think that this is a really, really interesting book. Just how it was written. It was just, like, I'm still kind of trying to find the words to describe how I feel about this book, because it was so interesting. The characters themselves were not anything really special except maybe Fia, and the storyline was interesting, but again, not like anything amazingly special, but the writing style really came across very interesting. I do think that a lot of people aren't necessarily going to like the writing style, but it's, I guess I never gave a synopsis, yeah? So we have, there's two sisters, Sophia, Fia, and Annie. And Annie is blind, but she also sees visions of the future. And Fia, it turns out, has perfect instincts. And so they end up at this school that was ostensibly supposed to be for Annie, and to see if they could exploit her gift. And they found out that Fia actually is the bigger catch. And so they're using Annie to keep Fia there and doing what they want her to do, which is not generally anything for the sight of good. And so they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. Now, because they have people who see the future and people who can read your emotions and read your thoughts and everything, trying to plan an escape is absolutely ridiculous. You can't do it. And so how Fia thinks and talks and acts is very particular so that nobody can kind of get a read on her. And it's very evident in the writing style in her chapters. And I think that it's something that's very interestingly done, but I don't think everybody would love it. And that's why I thought it was incredible and just very interesting, and I highly recommend it, but it's not going to be for everybody. At least give it a shot. And that is it. That is everything that I read in the month of October. I think I did pretty well with 8 books read, 2 DNFs, which will be in a separate video, and then 5 volumes of manga. That's it. Let me know down below what you've been reading and if any of these books piqued your interest, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.